stand in the dimly lit kitchen, the air thick with the scent of blood and fear. My heart pounds in my chest as I grip the knife tightly, my eyes fixed on Emily's lifeless body sprawled on the cold, tiled floor. Her eyes are wide open, a look of sheer terror frozen on her face. I can hardly breathe, the reality of what I've done crashing over me in waves. How did it come to this? How did our love turn into such a nightmare? Why did you make me do this, Emily? I whispered, my voice trembling. The silence that followed was deafening. "6 months ago, I was just a regular guy. My name is Alex, and I worked as a software developer at a tech company in the city. My life was mundane and predictable, a series of repetitive days that blurred into one another. I went to work, came home, watched TV and slept. Rinse and repeat. That is, until I met Emily. Emily joined our company as a marketing specialist. She was beautiful, with long blonde hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through me. From the moment I saw her, I was captivated. She had this aura about her, something magnetic that drew me in. We started talking during lunch breaks, and before long we were spending more and more time together. Emily was charming, intelligent, and had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. Our connection was instant and intense. It wasn't long before we were officially a couple. First, everything was perfect. We spent our weekends exploring the city, trying out new restaurants, and going on spontaneous road trips. Emily brought excitement and passion into my life. She made me feel alive. But as our relationship deepened, I started to notice a darker side to her. Emily was possessive. She wanted to know where I was at all times, who I was with, and what I was doing. At first, I thought it was endearing that she cared so much, but soon it became suffocating. She would text me constantly, and if I didn't respond immediately, she would become anxious and angry. One evening, after a late night at work, I returned home to find Emily waiting outside my apartment. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked frantic. "Where have you been?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I've been worried sick. I told you I had a late meeting," I replied, trying to calm her down. "You don't need to worry so much. I can't help it, Alex," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much. I can't bear the thought of losing you." Her intensity was overwhelming, but I convinced myself that it was just a sign of her deep love for me. I ignored the warning signs, blinded by my own feelings. I wanted to believe that our love was special, that it was worth the sacrifices. As the months went by, Emily's behavior grew more erratic. She started showing up at my office unannounced, insisting on going through my phone and social media accounts. She accused me of flirting with other women, even though I had done nothing to warrant her suspicions. Her jealousy was all-consuming. One night, things took a dark turn. We had been arguing for hours, Emily accusing me of not loving her enough, of being unfaithful. Her eyes were wild, and there was a desperation in her voice that I had never heard before. "You don't understand, Alex," she cried. "I'm doing this because I love you. I need you to prove that you love me too." I tried to calm her down, but she wasn't listening. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen and pressed it against her own throat. "If you don't love me, then I have no reason to live," she said, her voice trembling. My heart raced as I tried to talk her down, promising her that I loved her, that I would do anything for her. She eventually lowered the knife, but the fear in her eyes haunted me. I realized then that Emily's love was not just passionate, it was dangerous. I should have left her that night, but I didn't. I was too scared of what she might do to herself, too worried about leaving her alone. I convinced myself that I could help her, that I could save her from her own demons. But in reality, I was trapped. As the weeks passed, Emily's behavior became more unpredictable. She would disappear for days, only to return with wild stories about people following her, about how she was being watched. She started having nightmares, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. I was at my wit's end, exhausted and terrified. Then, one night, everything changed. I came home from work to find the apartment in disarray. Furniture was overturned, and there were broken glass and blood on the floor. My heart sank as I called out for Emily, but there was no answer. I found her in the bedroom, clutching a bloody knife. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she was muttering incoherently. When she saw me, she dropped the knife and ran to me, sobbing. "They were here, Alex. They were going to take you away from me," she cried. "I had to protect you. I had to show them that you're mine." I held her as she cried, but my mind was racing. I didn't know who they were, but I knew that Emily had crossed a line. I needed to get help, but I was too afraid of what she might do if I left her alone. The next morning, I called in sick to work and took Emily to see a therapist. She was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. The therapist diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and prescribed medication. For a while, things seemed to improve. Emily was calmer, and her episodes were less frequent. I began to hope that we could get through this together. But my hope was short-lived. One evening, I came home to find another package on our doorstep. It was addressed to me with no return address. Inside, I found a series of photographs. They were of me taken without my knowledge. Some were from months ago, some as recent as that morning. My blood ran cold as I realized that someone had been watching me. Emily's reaction was immediate and intense. She was convinced that the photos were a threat, that someone was trying to take me away from her. Her paranoia escalated, and she refused to let me out of her sight. She quit her job to stay home with me, convinced that it was the only way to keep me safe. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Emily's love had turned into an obsession, and I was suffocating under the weight of it. I tried to reason with her, to make her see that her behavior was destroying us, but she wouldn't listen. She was too far gone, lost in her own delusions. One night, things reached a breaking point. Emily had been pacing the apartment, muttering to herself about the people who were trying to take me away. I tried to calm her down, but she snapped. She grabbed the knife from the kitchen and lunged at me, her eyes wild with fury. "I won't let them have you, Alex," she screamed. "If I can't have you, no one will." I fought her off, managing to disarm her, but she was relentless. She came at me again and again, her love twisted into a violent rage. In the struggle, I managed to grab the knife and, in a moment of desperation, I stabbed her. Emily collapsed to the floor, blood pouring from the wound. I stood there, the knife still in my hand, staring at her lifeless body. The reality of what I had done hit me like a freight train, and I dropped to my knees, sobbing. Now, as I stand in the dimly lit kitchen, my hands covered in blood, I realize that Emily's love was not love at all. It was a deadly obsession, a force that consumed and destroyed everything in its path. I look down at her body, her eyes still wide with terror, and I feel a pang of guilt and sorrow. I don't know what will happen next. The police will come, and I will have to explain what happened. But no matter what, I will never forget the love that turned deadly, the obsession that led to this gruesome end. Emily's love was a nightmare, one that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I walk to the phone, my hands still trembling, and dial 911. As I wait for the operator to answer, I take one last look at Emily. "I'm so sorry," I whisper. "I loved you, but your love was too much." The operator's voice comes through the line, and I begin to speak, my voice shaking. "There's been an accident. I need help." The reality of my situation sinks in as I hear the sirens in the distance. My life will never be the same, and the memory of Emily's love will haunt me forever.